Hi, my name is Sean Collins. I want to thank you for watching this YouTube video about a paper that Dr. Tyson Browning and I published in the Journal of Operations Management. That paper is called It Worked There, so it should work here. Sustaining change while improving product development processes. It's really about these three things. Process improvement in a product development context and implemented in a manner that sustains the change that takes place when you do this work. So I'm going to share my presentation, and I'll tell you a little bit more about what we did. So OM researchers, OM practitioners live with the reality of pressures to be faster, better, quicker, cheaper, any number of attributes, and they're constantly tinkering and experimenting with figuring out how to meet these pressures. And one way that they do this is through process improvement programs, which we'll call PIPs. It can be Lean, it can be Six Sigma, it can be Agile, it can be Scrum. People are experimenting with these things all the time. They're coming up with new ones. They're putting things together in ways, basically anything that will help them sustain a competitive advantage. So all of this experimenting is happening, and PIPs are a reality of life, and they've been studied at length. And one of the things we know is that they're supposed to bring benefits, and that doesn't always happen. There's a lot of variation in terms of the benefits that are achieved in practice. And there's also some variation in terms of kind of the mechanism of what you should be looking for, right? From a first principles perspective, it makes sense that everybody is dealing with waste. Everybody has an upstream and a downstream customer. You can write down your stuff, you can put it in terms of a process. And so you should be able to leverage experience that other people have. So if I'm in product development, I can look at what somebody's learning in manufacturing or similarly in healthcare or services, and we should be able to give and exchange information from each other. And it's an appealing construct. We call it the thesis of transference. And there's some skeptics that say we're not sure that this is a good idea, and we're certainly not sure if it works really well. So when we think about PIPs, right, we've got a pretty good body of literature about what a good PIP looks like once it's mature. We can talk about theory of Lean, theory of Six Sigma, etc. But understanding how they actually get implemented, and particularly understanding what implementation looks like when we're applying them in a new context, that's a little bit fuzzier. And so it's a place where there's some good opportunities to do some research, and that's where this paper kind of that's part of where this paper sits. So excuse me, we looked at this at a product development company. We call it DevCo. It's a division of a big multinational company. We'll call it Multinet. Multinet had a PIP that had been successful in one of their divisions, and they wanted all of their divisions to implement it. And so DevCo was told, we expect you to implement the PIP, and we expect you to do it to a certain set of timelines. The PIP had 3 stages of maturity: bronze, silver, and gold. And bronze is kind of you just starting your understanding what your processes are, getting your house in order. Silver is thinking through what really does process improvement, how does that take shape in this case at DevCo. And then gold is you've done the improvements, now you're moving into proper optimization and maintaining kind of super world-class process control. So this was a 24-month study. It was part of a bigger mixed methods structural ethnography that I was doing at DevCo, and the focus of that bigger study was expertise in process control in the engineering department, and then this was focused, the process control side of that, particularly as it pertains to PIP implementation. The paper has two figures, and for time I've condensed it. We're just showing the one. But you have your goal of effective PIP implementation, and there's the steps from Levine, right? Unfreeze, change, and refreeze. And we went upstream from that, looked at some of the other organizational change literature and said, okay, what are the input conditions that enable you to unfreeze, change, and refreeze? And so We said, all right, you need to do all of these things from urgency down through applying resources. When we then look at DevCo, through their experience with the PIP implementation, we said, what are we getting as expected versus as experienced? And so that moves us upstream even more, and we go through the particular findings that emerge from that research, and then we identify propositions that connect the findings to the original theoretical framework. So this is kind of the meat of the findings of the paper and what we did. And my summary would be to say this was not an issue of it was a screaming success or it was an abject failure. It was a lot more nuanced. There were things about the PIP that worked well. There were things about the PIP that didn't work well. And in the midst of some of the skepticism, people were using language of value, waste, effectiveness to say we want to move away from the status quo, but we're not convinced that the tools and methods and constructs from the PIP are going to actually help us get there. So yeah, right, I'm interested in buying something. I'm not interested in what you're selling. So lots of researchers work in this space, right? What is it about our paper that is particularly unique, makes it worth paying attention to? I think there's probably 4 things that we talk about on this slide. So the first thing is we are being very clear about looking at PIP implementation when it's mandatory instead of voluntary. And you can, whether you like this or not, it's a reality of life in the managerial world. You don't always have the choice of whether you get to do a PIP or which PIP you get to do. So we need to understand that. We need to understand that this is one of the big contexts of how PIPs are implemented in organizations. I've talked about how we understand what a good PIP looks like when it's mature. We don't really understand how to implement it and sustain it. And this paper is stepping into that gap and saying, let's try to build some of this knowledge about what the actual practice of implementing a PIP might look like and how organizations adapt well or maybe not so well when they're trying to sustain a change. That adaptation is in looking at what are characteristic and causal factors when we're actually transferring, right? So this is not about how do we improve a definition of lean in an agile, lean in a manufacturing context, or how do we improve definition of agile software in a really short interval software development process. This is about taking constructs, moving them across contexts. So if that's your space as a researcher, if that's your space as a practitioner, this is something of relevance. And we're doing this by connecting a couple different strands of academic research. So we have the organizational change theory, and we're applying that to 2 puzzles that OM folks deal with. The researchers know that PIPs are inconsistent with their benefits, and they want to understand why, and we think that organizational change can help. Practitioners have to symbolically comply with expectations of implementing a PIP, but they need to understand that symbolic success is not adequate. You need substantive success as well. So let's make the distinction. Let's understand what goes into each of those steps of success. And hopefully that helps you as a practitioner navigate that problem space a little bit more effectively. And the last thing, and this is not in the paper, but I'll make a comment about it here in the video, is that it is cross-disciplinary research. I am not an OM researcher. I am an anthropologist by training, and so I was coming out of the organizational change space. And the opportunity to work with Dr. Browning on this and to combine organizational change constructs in the OM context, it was hard work, but it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun to put the ideas together and to see where it led us in terms of the research and the findings and the implications at DevCo. So again, I want to thank you for watching this video, and yes, have a look at the paper, and hopefully it's of some use. Thank you.